Are you kidding me? Just when you thought Washington couldn't get any more corrupt, here we go again. Nancy Pelosi, the so-called Speaker of the House, she's in the spotlight for yet another shady deal, guys. And this time, it's her husband's $6 million stock move that's raising red flags everywhere. And who's calling her out on it? Well, it's none other than Trump's Attorney General, the fearless Matt Gaetz, who's ripping her to shreds over this blatant conflict of interest. And apparently, Democrats are fed up with Nancy Pelosi. In fact, Democrats are now blaming Nancy Pelosi for losing control, and even John Fetterman is going off on Nancy Pelosi for blaming Biden. We're going to get to that in just a second. But Nancy Pelosi's husband somehow miraculously made a $5.3 million profit right when Congress was about to go after big tech. Is this a coincidence? I don't think so. Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump AG, they're not buying it, and neither am I. I don't think you are either. Y'all let me know what you think. But this isn't just smoke. This is literally a 5-alarm fire. Folks, we're about to dive into this one right here. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's jump in.
Tim Cook reportedly called Pelosi to deliver a warning about Congress's antitrust bills.
Without objection.
So maybe it's the lobbyists, maybe it's the power of these very powerful CEOs making personal calls, but it could even be something more sinister. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a Fortune.com piece entitled Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband cashed in on big tech just as Congress was set to pounce.
Without objection.
And in that article, there's discussion of the spouse of the Speaker of the House making a $6 million call on stocks that netted $5.3 million while we're not moving these bills. This is
unbelievable, guys. So Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, allegedly made a personal phone call to Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, to warn her about some antitrust bills that Congress was preparing to vote on. So we wouldn't normally be able to do anything like this. Obviously, I don't have Nancy Pelosi's cell phone number, but these bills, they're designed to break up these big, large, huge tech companies like Amazon and Apple, ultimately forcing them to operate as smaller, separate entities. Well, Tim Cook's involvement, it just kind of highlights how powerful CEOs are in trying to protect their businesses and their own personal interests by influencing key lawmakers like Nancy Pelosi.
my favorite subcommittee in my half decade in Congress, and in no small part because of the way you've led it. I am incredibly proud of the work we have done to address some of these anti-competitive practices of these monopolistic entities. And I was particularly persuaded by the testimony of Mr. Gross regarding how that market power of big businesses like Amazon can limit the ability of workers to have any type of meaningful negotiation. Congresswoman Jayapal led legislation that the chairman of the committee, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Buck, and myself supported that would force the breakup of companies like Amazon into smaller entities. And I wanted Mr. Gross's perspective on that. Do you believe, as a negotiator, that would improve the position of workers to break up companies like Amazon and other big tech companies into smaller entities?
Well, I'm not an expert on this field. You know, obviously I'm just a driver at UPS and the shop steward for my union. But what I would say though is that it might not necessarily be necessary to break up the size of the company, but just to allow or force the company or encourage the company to employ the workers that it's utilizing. So instead of using third-party individuals and leaning on them and chewing them up and spitting them out, have real employees, you know, give them real wages, allow them to have a collective bargaining unit agreement. And I think that way you would get more productivity out of them in the long run and still be able to run a successful business.
I appreciate that perspective. My concern is that if they're able to stay so big, even if we used the awesome powers of the federal government to force these relationships out of independent contractor relationships into employment relationships, they're still so big that they could reduce the contributions of those employees with the strength that they have. And it is one of the reasons why we had bipartisan support on this committee for those bills. But Mr. Chairman, I'm deeply disappointed that those bills haven't been called up for a vote.
Now, while all of this is happening, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, he made a big financial move that shocked a lot of people. He reportedly bought $6 million worth of tech stocks, and he earned a $5.3 million profit shortly afterward, okay? So now what's really suspicious is that this happened right as Congress was debating bills that could have hurt big tech. Now, a lot of people are asking some tough questions. Did Paul Pelosi use insider knowledge from his wife, Nancy Pelosi? I mean, is it unbelievable to think that that might have occurred? I mean, was this just a coincidence, or were powerful lobbyists influencing these decisions? I mean, these are just basic questions that anybody with a brain is thinking, right? And so, of course, Matt Gaetz and other lawmakers, they're now leveraging their power of the government, and they're pressing these individuals. So Congressman Matt Gaetz, he didn't hold back, guys. He and other lawmakers like Josh Hawley, Pramila Jayapal, they're arguing that the influence of big tech and lobbyists, it was making it possible to be able to pass these laws that would hold companies like Amazon accountable. Now, Matt Gaetz, he pointed out how these companies, they're using their size to exploit the workers, like relying on independent contractors instead of offering real employee benefits to real employees. You know what I'm saying? Have any of you guys gotten screwed by your employer outsourcing and only hiring contractors and third parties, sending jobs overseas? Yeah, that kind of crap, right? He supported efforts led by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal to break up these monopolies, saying that it would protect the workers and create more fair competition.
It seems a bit odd to be here talking about positive impacts of legislation subcommittee has passed when the full House has had the opportunity in prior weeks to take up these bills and they haven't. And I have to wonder why that has happened. And so, Mr. Chairman,
I will guess that it's probably got to do a lot with a lot of this lobbying that's taking place.
If you go right now to the New York Post website, the lead story is all about Nancy Pelosi. Miranda Devine has written a great op-ed. Nancy Pelosi is finished. No one deserves more blame for the Dems' $1 billion electoral collapse than her. Keep in mind, she's the one who stabbed Joe Biden in the chest, and essentially he had to walk the plank. So she is the reason Kamala Harris was the nominee, and she is the reason, according to so many people, that they really stunk up the place this election.
Wow, so Nancy Pelosi is the one that is the mastermind, the main think tank participant that has led to the Kamala Harris debacle here. This tragic campaign that took place here against Donald Trump. Unbelievable, guys. And so the house of cards is now falling, and they've all fallen down on the Nancy Pelosi, and she's now being blamed by fellow Democrats. And they're going off on Nancy Pelosi for trying to blame Biden.
The New York Times that President Biden should have dropped his re-election bid earlier, and that if he had, Democrats might have had the opportunity to run an open primary. And that led to this headline. Axios headline says, "Scoop, House Dems sick of Pelosi." And one senior House Democrat that was interviewed says, quote, "She needs to take a seat."
Yeah, right. By the way, how disrespectful it is for the sitting speaker. Hakeem Jeffries, he's the one who should be front and center. He's the one who should be giving explanations, excuses, and setting up a mission. And he said that a member of the Congressional Black Caucus said this: "I don't think Pelosi, is being respectful of him, Jeffries." Now, Jeffries was asked that specifically on Sunday on Meet the Press.
Wow. So Nancy Pelosi straight up disrespected Hakeem Jeffries, basically went over his head and ignored his position on the political foreground.
Very quickly, though, do you think she's undermining your leadership with her public pronouncements?
No.
Okay, that was quick. One of the arguments that Nancy Pelosi made is that President Biden should have gotten out of the race sooner. Do you believe he should have dropped out sooner?
I think that President Biden will go down in history as one of the most consequential presidents of all time, and I was thankful for all of the work that we were able to do together. He did make the decision. It was a selfless decision to pass the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. I think she ran with it and did the best job that she could under incredibly challenging circumstances in a little over 100 days. She came close, but we fell short.
You know, it's funny. It looks like they got to him. They said, look, this is the script you're going to read. I don't give a damn what you think, what you feel. This is what you're going to say if you want to keep your job. I also think it's really funny how these politicians, they hear the question and they think to themselves, am I going to answer this or not? And this is another one of those sidestep remarks.
Telling the truth. Because Joe Biden said it would take God Almighty to pull him out of the race. And then he went on a 2-week rally binge, as well as doing about 4 network interviews. If Biden wanted to finish this out and was maybe not told the truth or lying about his own polls, but Nancy Pelosi said when the guys didn't step up, meaning Obama and Clinton, I had to go out and do it. And then they finished the job. Maybe it started with George Clooney. But he's not being honest. I know he's in a hard spot and they get along, but that's not being. I think the one thing that she did not figure out, she's the most overrated politician of our generation. Ooh. Remember, this is the woman who classlessly tore up the State of the Union address that the whole world watches as if that was, and she couldn't do it. She had to do it one at a time. So that's when she lost it. And she was asked in her own daughter's documentary, she said, I should have put more National Guard troops there on January 6th. She doesn't even bring that up again. Well, ultimately, Joe Biden.
How does this lady get away with this stuff? Nancy Pelosi, how does she just literally, it's like she just gets away with murder. She gets away with everything. What? You got to wonder, what kind of dirt does Nancy Pelosi have over all these different people that basically continue to support her, even though she's willing to stab you in the back if you get out of line or if things don't go according to plan?
Biden has not been in good shape for a year and a half or 2 years. He should have stepped aside for the country and now for the party. And she and other top Democrats saw him with their own 2 eyes and let this happen. And then eventually she stabbed him in the chest, as I said a moment ago, but it was too late.
And she wanted an open primary. I think she knew in her heart of hearts that Kamala Harris wasn't the right one for the job.
Right. Well, you would have to have, Joe would have had to back out long before to have an open primary.
They wanted to have a jungle primary and have an old-fashioned convention.
In 6 weeks.
Where they put everyone's name in a hat. Yeah. And then they would have lost all the money that Joe Biden had. The only person that could keep that money was the vice president. And she...
Because her name was on the ticket.
What I think has come out is that her goal was to make it an open primary. She had everything right until Joe Biden says, I'm endorsing the vice president. That stopped her plan in its tracks. And they were stuck with somebody with 32% approval rating who can't retain a staff and doesn't understand policy and is too lazy to read it.
Exactly.
Wow, guys. This will forever go down in history as the most memorable failure of any campaign. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. This is literally a first, guys. And I'm glad that I'm around. I'm glad that I'm personally around to witness this firsthand.
Mary Catherine Ham with me this morning. Mary Catherine, has the transformation of America's government really begun?
Well, look, the entire campaign, what did Trump signal with the people that he surrounded himself with? They were all outsiders. They are all people who criticized the current system. And by the way, why did a lot of voters give him a chance again? Because he was signaling that. I call it I'm going to sanitize it. Y'all are full of it electorate. They looked at the elites and they said, I think you have been lying to me. COVID was really hard. This economy's been really hard. Biden, I don't even think is capable of being president, and you keep lying to my face about it. So I'm going to give some outsiders a chance. I
think this is brilliant, and I think this is why the left is so concerned and worried. They're shaking. They're visibly shaking at times at the announcement of every new Trump cabinet pick, because it's exactly who they don't want. This basically Donald Trump is one by one cleaning out the swamp, and it makes them uncomfortable. And they don't know. It's kind of like lifting up a big heavy rock that's been sitting there for a long time, and then you see all these bugs scattering under it. This is exactly what Donald Trump's doing to these folks right now, and they're scared.
If you have any doubt about whether he wants to really reform, you can look down at Mar-a-Lago, where he was hanging out with Javier Milei of Argentina this week. And Javier Milei is a guy who came in and ditched 50% of his federal government's agencies, among other many radical changes, to the benefit of the economy of Argentina, by the way. So he's been signaling this throughout. And I think the question is, each person he brings up, can this person bring the reform they're promising? Can they get through a confirmation process? Some are more popular than others on the Hill, right? But I do think I'm interested in the confirmation hearings, because I think that this radical reform should be voiced, and the people who can be reformers can explain it well in front of hard questioning.
You know, this is going to be very interesting. You know, Javier, leader of Venezuela, who's in the process of transforming one of the worst economic situations the world has ever seen over in Venezuela. And if Donald Trump was able to glean some introspect from Javier on how he managed to turn around this demolished economy, the economy over in Venezuela was destroyed. And if they can turn that around, if we can learn some of the strategies that were implemented over there and implement it here in America, because we are headed down in that pathway. But if we could kind of like make an about face or make some adjustments, the United States we can literally make America great again, and quite possibly have and experience one of the most robust economic systems that we've ever experienced.
Do you think voters generally are ready for this? I mean, we're talking about some real serious moves in various departments, whether Health and Human Services, whether it's the Justice Department, wherever. There's a real revolution coming here. We weren't really aware of it during the election campaign. We're aware of it now. Are we ready for it?
I think they will be ready for it if it works. This is the Milei model, right? Milei did a bunch of drastic things, but if it behooves people, if it works in their lives, if they're making good on some promises and things are changing for the better, people will be fine with it. Yeah. But there might be a short runway for proving that to them.
I think you're right. Democratic Senator John Fetterman, he went after Nancy Pelosi after she blamed Biden for the Democrats' losses. Fetterman told Pelosi, quote, "You got what you wanted and now you're still blaming Biden." He suggested she step down to give a younger generation an opportunity.
Wow, guys, is it time for Nancy Pelosi to finally step down from her position in politics? I mean, seriously, guys, I don't know, she is probably the oldest person in from either side, from Democrats or Republicans right now. Is it time for Nancy Pelosi to step down?
Pelosi will be 86 in the 2026 midterms. Is it time to make way for a younger generation?
Man, I got to tell you, that guy is quotable.
He is now.
Look, I think,
and I don't know if you guys noticed, but John Fetterman was actually wearing a suit today.
Was the argument of the Kamala Harris campaign is that there needs to be a new generation, and I think Pelosi needs to decide whether she is this legendary leader who knocks heads and makes all the decisions, or whether she doesn't have any responsibility at all. Which one is it? So I think Fetterman makes a good point, and I think he makes a good point about this sort of stultifying leadership that's been in place for decades that people have largely rejected in favor of something they're taking a pretty big risk on, as we talked about in the last discussion.
Guys, 2024 is time for change. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is going to be a powerhouse team. I cannot wait to see the execution take place. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, check out my previous videos coming up here, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.